We've gone through just about every human body system, and the last one for us is reproductive system. So, just in general, what is the function of the reproductive system? Scott?
Make babies.
To make new organisms. So in humans, obviously that's new humans. In the male and female reproductive system are both adapted to doing it, to make new organisms. We'll talk first about the male reproductive system, then we'll talk about the female reproductive system, talk a little bit about pregnancy and childbirth and fetus, talk a little bit about cell division as well. But we'll start with the male reproductive system. And this is some review, because when we talked previously about the testes, what body system were we referring to? The endocrine system, which is what? Our body system producing what?
Hormones.
Hormones. Okay? So the testes are endocrine glands because they produce which hormone?
Testosterone.
Testosterone. But they also produce sperm cells. So the testes in the male produce this hormone, testosterone. They also produce sperm cells. Now sperm cells, the word we're going to use, sometimes we call them sex cells or sometimes gametes. That can go for males or females. So in females, egg cells are the gametes or the sex cells, and males are sperm cells. And so we talked about this in the endocrine system. Testosterone is a chemical messenger made by a gland, the testes, that circulates throughout a person's blood. And we call those things what?
Hormones.
Yeah, they're hormones. Testosterone is a hormone that's responsible for the development of secondary male sex characteristics. Again, those traits that are typical of males, and they come about because of increased levels of testosterone as somebody gets older. And so the hormone testosterone has effects throughout the body. And if you think about what are some typical male characteristics, things like facial hair. An increase in facial hair is associated with an increase in testosterone. Now, as I told you back at the endocrine system, females do have low levels of testosterone in their bodies as well. And just like males also have low levels of estrogen as well. And so testosterone is responsible for facial hair, body hair. Also a deeper voice. Muscle mass. The effects of testosterone is to increase the muscle mass of a person. And that's why men have a greater percentage of muscle mass compared to the rest of their body. Females have lower levels of muscle. Men are generally stronger than women. And that's because of the effects of testosterone. Okay? Because males have much greater levels of testosterone, they are stronger, they have more muscle mass. It's also why testosterone is sometimes used as what?
Steroids.
As a steroid, as a performance-enhancing drug for athletes. Because if a person so everyone has a certain level of testosterone in their body, but if they artificially give themselves more testosterone, it can help them to increase their muscle mass. Okay? But because testosterone has effects throughout our body, it also has a lot of negative side effects as well. Okay? Testosterone is also associated with aggressiveness. And that's why you may have heard about people on steroids often can, get mad, flip out very easily, get roid rage, sometimes it's called, because testosterone does have effects on personality as well. Stop.
So like when you take like steroids and stuff, you get really hairy?
Sometimes, and I mean there's a whole, because testosterone is very complex in the body, so yeah, and sometimes it also, females sometimes take testosterone, Like if you ever seen on TV, sometimes these really huge female bodybuilders.
They're disgusting.
But when you see them, how do you think they look?
Disgusting.
And some probably would say, oh, they kind of look manly. And that's because most of them, I can't say all of them, but depending on the situation, many of them are on testosterone. And so it has other effects besides just letting them get really big and muscular, it has other effects as well. So testosterone is responsible for a whole bunch of things.
Would you make estrogen steroids?
Yeah, there is estrogen. People take artificial estrogen for a few reasons. Sometimes estrogen is used in birth control pills. Sometimes women, as they get older and their estrogen levels drop, they may take estrogen pills to help replace some of that. So there is estrogen people take as well. It's not used in sports or anything because it doesn't have any of the positive effects in terms of muscle mass and things like that, so people generally wouldn't take that.
How come when you people that play sports take steroids and they pee and then they take the test, that's how they
Yeah, they test,
well, how could you tell if they already have testosterone in their body?
Yeah, because that's a good question. They look for exactly how much, because they know that a normal man has this level of testosterone. If they do a urine test and the results come back and the level is twice as high, then they know that they're artificially giving themselves testosterone probably.
Okay, another question. So how could you because I forget, but it was someone in baseball, they took steroids, and it wasn't testosterone, so when they took the test, they passed, but they were on steroids.
Yeah, well, and so when we say steroids, that's kind of like a general term. Like when we say steroids, it could mean lots of different things. Usually it's not they're just taking straight testosterone. Sometimes they can take other chemicals that are similar to testosterone, but not exactly the same. Also, like human growth hormone is a different class of things. And for a long time, human growth hormone, there was no test for it. Even though it was illegal to use, like Major League Baseball didn't have a way of testing for it, so people could do it and they know they wouldn't get caught. There are tests now for human growth hormone. And sometimes, people go take these steroids in cycles. Like they'll take them for a while and then go off of them. And so if they sort of think they may be tested soon, they may go off of them and then go back on after the test. So there's different ways they have of cheating the system. Eventually, you'll keep some of that muscle mass raw, but taking that testosterone allows you to keep an artificially high level of those muscles. All right, so besides the testosterone, like we said, testes produce sperm cells, the male sex cells. And this is a sperm cell, and it has a tail. What do we call that? Yeah, it's a flagellum. Why do sperm cells have a flagellum?
So they can swim around.
So they can swim. Where do they need to swim to?
To the egg.
To the egg. Exactly. They have a little area. It's hard to see in this diagram, but this area right here is a little bit enlarged. It's kind of like the motor of the flagellum. It's got mitochondria, uses glucose, releases energy to allow that tail to help that sperm cell swim to where it needs to go. And then in the head of the sperm is where what is contained?
DNA.
Yeah, the DNA, the chromosomes, they're here in the head of the sperm. 23 of those small chromosomes are there.
Wait, so how does sperm reproduce?
They don't. They're produced in the testes, but one sperm cell then doesn't split into two sperm cells. They're made that way, and then they go try to do their job, and they either make it or they don't. So they're produced in the testes by other cells. There's a type of cell reproduction called meiosis that takes normal cells and can use them to make sperm cells, and that happens in the testes. So that's a sperm cell, and the testes in humans are not actually technically inside of the body, but they're held outside of the body in a pouch of skin called the scrotum. Did you guys talk about why that's the case?
Yeah.
No, we
What's it have to do with? John?
Because if the sperm are too hot, they'll die.
Yeah, that sperm are best produced at temperatures that are lower than normal body temperature. Normal body temperature is 98.6. For sperm cells to be created and live and do well, they need to be a few degrees cooler. So they're actually outside of the body in the scrotum to provide a slightly cooler temperature. And that's not true of all animals. Some animals, the testes are inside of the body. It just varies from animal to So that's the scrotum. So, as we talked about, these sperm cells, they need to swim their way to the egg. But in order to swim, you need a fluid to swim through. Okay? And so that's where semen comes in. Sperm on their own wouldn't be able to make it to the egg cell, but along the pathway through the male body, different substances get added to the sperm, and that's what we call semen. It helps protect the sperm, gives them something to swim in. It also provides nutrients and energy. For these sperm cells to make their way to the egg, it's a pretty long journey for them. And for them to have the energy to swim that way, they absorb nutrients from the semen. These are what sperm cells really look like under the microscope. And you can see there's a dozen or so sperm there. You can see the head of the sperm where the chromosomes are, a little enlarged area behind it, which is kind of like the motor, and then the flagellum behind it.
When the sperm goes into the egg, doesn't it like tail right now?
Yeah, once it gets in there, and we'll talk about that when we talk about fertilization, but yeah, the egg changes and a whole bunch of other stuff happens as well. All right, so if we talk about parts of the human reproductive system, now, does anybody notice anything about these parts I've listed up here?
We already learned that.
Right. These are not really parts of the reproductive system. They're parts of what? Hammer? Hammer? Yeah, the excretory system. Okay? But they are linked and they're in the same vicinity, so that's why we have them here. So if we look at this diagram, this shows sort of a side view of the male anatomy. We start here. This is the ureter. This little tube. Now what's not shown in this diagram?
Kidneys.
Yeah, the kidneys. They'd be up here a little ways. They produce the urine, which goes through the ureter to the bladder. We should know that from excretory system. So this organ is what? That's the urinary bladder. It holds the urine until it can be eliminated through the urethra. So the urethra carries urine from the bladder and out of the body, but it also carries semen out of the body as well. So those are excretory organs. Well, these are the reproductive organs. So if we start off in the testes down here. Okay, there's two of them, left and a right. So the side views, only one of them is shown. And the testes produce sperm and testosterone. They're held outside of the body, in the scrotum, pouch of skin that houses the testes. So the sperm are produced down here in the testes, and then when they're ready to leave the male body, they travel through this tube that goes sort of up and into the body, loops around, comes back down. This tube that they travel through first, right as they leave the testes, is called the Vas Deferens. Is it?
The tube, the Vas Deferens, if it's inside the body, wouldn't the sperm die because of the body?
No, because they only travel there for a very short period of time when they're leaving the body. So they stay in the testes is where they're produced, and then they travel through that tube quickly and out of the body. Now, does anybody know the name of a procedure that a man can have if they no longer want to have children, that they can permanently not have children, John?
Vasectomy.
Vasectomy. And that comes from this name, Vas Deferens. That's where vasectomy comes from. So you know what they do in a vasectomy?
They cut it.
Get rid of it.
They tie it off.
Yeah, they cut the vas deferens, this tube. Okay, they do an operation where they make an incision, they cut that vas deferens tube and basically seal off the two ends. And so then the man still can make sperm cells, but they cannot be released out of his body. They can't, because there's that gap there, because that tube has been cut, they can't leave his body. And therefore, if he doesn't produce sperm cells, he can't make a woman pregnant, because the sperm's needed to fertilize the egg. So those sperm cells can't get out, and therefore they can't have children anymore. Now, very rarely, I think less than 1% of the time, but every once in a while, sometimes those two ends of the vas deferens heal themselves and kind of grow back together. And that means a man could have children, could make a woman pregnant, even though he thinks he might not be able to.
Ooh, that's bad.
What if they burst?
They don't. They seal them so they don't burst. When I was sort of unrelated, sort of somewhat related. When I was in high school, like 17, 18 years old, I thought I wanted to be a vet. So I decided I was going to be like a. So I decided I was going to be an intern at the Old Forge Veterinary Clinic. So I went up there for the summer and I worked with the vet up there. And I realized eventually I didn't want to be a vet. And one of the reasons was because I didn't think I had like the stomach for it. Because one of the things we had to do, so you know, if you have pets that you have them spayed and neutered, and so you know, in the females it's a surgery, and I was okay with the surgery. But what I distinctly can remember is the male cats, when they would bring them in to be fixed, what they did, and I was right there, you know, holding the cat, and they would basically grab on to the cat's testes one at a time and just yank on them until the vas deferens snapped. And just the sound alone, it was pretty gross. And I said, no, I don't know if I exactly want to be a vet.
I hope they put the cat in the head.
Yeah, they did. But it's still just the sound. But that's basically, you know, vasectomy that you're performing on that male cat.
One day.
So, yeah.
Why can't they do a surgery? Like just currently.
I mean, it's probably, I guess they must know that it's effective and it's less traumatic probably really for the cat than cutting them open and doing it. Maybe accomplishes the same thing. I don't exactly know.
Yeah, but don't they cut female dogs open?
Yeah, they have to do surgery. For female dogs, they have to do surgery and they basically cut the fallopian tubes. But, yeah. All right. So vas deferens transports sperm from the testes to the urethra. And then it leaves the body through the urethra. Along the way, there's a few glands that add different fluids and material to the sperm cells to form the semen. And the two of them that we'll talk about, the seminal vesicles up here and the prostate gland. Both of those add to the sperm to form the semen. Seminal vesicle is this one. It adds fluid to help nourish the sperm. And then the prostate gland as well, which also makes fluid for the sperm. Now, why have most of you heard of the prostate gland?
Prostate
Cancer.
Yeah, because prostate cancer is one of the most common, I think it's the most common form of cancer that affects men, especially older men. Like my grandfather had prostate cancer, that's what he died from. But it's fairly common, and so it's something that as men get older they need to be aware of. Because cancer is just uncontrolled growth of cells in a certain part of the body, and when it happens in the prostate gland, that's prostate cancer, and it can spread to other parts of the body. And so as men get older, sometimes they may have a blood test for a certain PSA and antigen that they can tell if that levels of that are elevated in their blood. They may have a problem, the doctor may have to check it out, or they may do a prostate exam, in which the doctor actually feels the size of the prostate, and if it's enlarged, that may be a sign that they need to look a little further to be sure that they don't have prostate cancer.
Wait, is that the same for the doctor and you go?
No, that's different.
Wait.
That's a different situation. So if you look at where the prostate gland is, to do a prostate exam, does anyone know what they do?
Yeah,
What the doctor does? Isaiah?
Oh,
He sticks his hand.
They use their fingers,
And just puts a glove over his hand.
puts a glove on.
Sticks like his two pointer finger or his pointer in his middle up the butt and just kind of feels around for the.
Yeah, if you look here, so this is the rectum. Back here, this is the anus. And so the doctor does, they put their fingers inside of the rectum, and they can actually feel, because it's right next door here, if you look at the anatomy, the prostate gland is right next door to the rectum, so they can actually feel with their hand. If they feel that the prostate gland is enlarged, then they may look at the PSA levels and other things, but that's how they do a prostate exam, is they feel with their hands to see if the prostate gland is enlarged. I'm
You're a witch.
yeah.
Oh, no.
Do you guys remember, did we watch Super Size Me?
No.
At one point, at the very beginning, when he's going for his initial exams, there's one section where they show him he's on the doctor's table, and he sort of roll over and they have to blur out section, but the doctor is going to do a prostate exam. That's what that part of the video is. They don't actually show it, but it's blurred out, but that's what's going on. So if a person does have prostate cancer, some of the treatments, like any type of cancer, some of the treatments, they may try to remove the tumor. Often they'll remove, Isaiah?
Yeah.
Often they'll remove the prostate gland and take it out. If they find the person has prostate cancer, they may do radiation treatment or whatever. One of the difficulties, though, is because of where it's located, sometimes they can damage some nerves, sometimes they may damage part of the bladder. And so often, or not often, but sometimes after the surgery to remove the prostate gland, a man may have difficulty going to the bathroom or things like that. That's sort of sometimes one of the side effects. So anyway, the prostate gland and the seminal vesicle add fluids to the sperm as they are making their way out of the man's body, and they leave through the urethra, which travels through the penis. So the penis delivers that semen into the female reproductive tract. Someone in my last class asked, no, you cannot use any slang terms for any anatomical parts.
Good afternoon. I need Brandon Ziegel to report to the office as soon as possible. Brandon Ziegel, please report to the main office as soon as possible.
So, sperm and semen leave through the urethra and are deposited into the female reproductive system. Excuse me? Why can't we use slang terms? Because there are actual anatomical terms that we will use that are better to use than. It doesn't matter. We might have to say the word penis and vagina in class. That's okay. So if you look at a different sort of view, we have the testes. Testicle, testes mean the same thing, just two different terms. Produce sperm and testosterone, travels through. This is the vas deferens, loops over and around the bladder, seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, add to it, and then out of the body through the urethra and through the penis.
Just out of curiosity, how long does it stay?
For the sperm to be produced,
No, to go to the bathroom.
well, to go to the bath, to go to the bathroom is separate. So, urine leaves the male body, also through the same tube as the urethra, leaves the bladder, and then out through the urethra, through the penis. But the sperm cells and the semen have to make their way up this way. Stuff gets added by these glands and then out of the body. But that happens quickly, and that's what ejaculation is during intercourse. It's the leaving of that sperm through the body.
How does pee turn yellow?
That's just because of the nitrogen. Urine is the nitrogen waste of. So it's two different substances. Semen and urine are two completely different substances. Urine is the waste products, sperm or semen are the sperm cells, along with those fluids that are added. So two completely separate substances, even though they leave the body through the same tube.
But they have to go through.
All right. Yeah, we can probably finish this. So let's move on. Female reproductive system. Now there's some similarities, like what's the equivalent of testes in a female?
Ovaries.
Yeah, ovaries, and they're actually testes and ovaries are both considered gonads. They're the glands that produce sex cells. So in females, there are two ovaries. They're within the body, though. And the job of the ovary, as we talked about, the endocrine system, are to produce estrogen as well as egg cells. But I guess I shouldn't really say makes egg cells or produces. Right, because females are born with already in their ovaries all of the egg cells they'll ever have for their life. They're already in there, and they don't produce any new egg cells. You know, there's several hundred egg cells in the ovary, and after puberty they just start to mature one at a time, but they're already in there. No new ones are ever produced. Whereas males would produce millions of sperm cells constantly. So the ovary releases hormones like estrogen into the blood, which is responsible for female secondary sex characteristics, but also once every 28 to 32 days allows an egg cell to mature and releases an egg cell. Is that?
You said they can only have 700, so does that mean they
Several hundred.
like 700?
No, like
Several.
multiple, like 400, 500, 200.
Oh, okay. So does that mean that they can have like 400 or 500 babies?
No, because so a woman can start to have children once she starts to ovulate, which means release an egg, and you know that happens in the early teen years usually, up until eventually she stops ovulating. That's what menopause is, and that's whatever, it could be 40, 45, whatever. But that's only how many years? That's let's say we can even say 10 to 45 is the biggest, 35 years. So obviously, if you're having children, it takes 10 months to have a child. So you couldn't have hundreds of children because you don't have it. It takes almost a full year to get pregnant, have the baby, and then become fertile.
Wait, what if you just kept giving birth to triplets?
All right, so let's move on. So the ovaries release these egg cells into, now there's a couple terms. We'll use fallopian tube, but the other word, and I think you'll use it later on as you move through school, is oviduct. What did you guys use in health class? Okay. So the fallopian tube actually, the egg, once it's released during ovulation, is released into the fallopian tube, and then starts to travel down, down the fallopian tube. It's also where it can be fertilized. Egg cells are fertilized in the fallopian tube, if they're fertilized. Fallopian tube leads to the uterus. Okay, the uterus is sort of a pouch-like muscle, and that is where the embryo and fetus will grow.
May I have your attention, please? We have a few cancellations, but please note,
Put it away.
not all after-school activities at the junior high are canceled. There still will be a late bus. However, the following activities are canceled. All computer lab, academic study hall, and office detention are canceled for today. That's all computer lab, academic study hall, and office detention are canceled for today. Please listen carefully because the following sports are canceled. Only the following sports are canceled, not all sports are canceled. The following are canceled. Girls varsity golf, boys varsity golf, boys JV baseball, boys modified baseball, boys varsity tennis, girls modified softball, boys modified track practice, girls JV and varsity lacrosse canceled. The teachers union meeting is still on for 3:30. The teachers union meeting is still on for 3:30. Also, students, there will be no buses that will go down to the high school. The reason for these cancellations is because of a power
Put your
outage
stuff away, we're not
on
done.
Oxford Road complex. Do not get on a bus planning to go to the high school. Do not go to the high school after school today. Again, I'm going to read the list of cancellations again. girls varsity golf, boys varsity golf, boys JV